Audio managers. Now there's a few different ways we could tackle creating an audio manager. The most common way being using the singleton pattern, which is fine, but you're still reliant on script dependencies. So the goal of this episode is to create a audio manager that acts like a singleton, but relies purely on events and is an event-driven system. So rather than getting any null errors if you haven't dragged your audio manager singleton into your scene while you're testing, it just won't play the sound. We'll also be looking at adding things like jukebox, radio stations, etc., to the audio system in later episodes. So let's get on with the first episode. So if you want to go ahead and create a folder called let me spit this out, underscore core, another tongue twister, and then within that create a folder called audio manager. Then we want a subfolder called mixer, a subfolder called prefabs, a subfolder called scriptable objects, a subfolder called script, and within the scripts folder another subfolder called scriptable objects. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is create an audio mixer. So if we go to our mixer folder, right click and create audio mixer, and we'll just call this audio mixer. Now if we double click to open it up, and we drag it over here so we can see a bit better. At the moment we've only got one channel, the master channel, so if we click on this plus by this group, this will create a new audio group as a child of the master group. So this will be our music channel, so we call this music. Now if we click plus with music highlighted, that will create a child of music, so we don't want to do that. So we want to go back up to master, click plus again, and we call this one SFX for sound effects. And now whilst we've got sound effects selected, we click plus again to create a new group, and we call this one SFX2. So we've got two audio channels. Now we want to highlight the master channel, come over to the volume here and right click, and then we want to expose this parameter, and expose parameters 1 will come up here. So if we click on that, it says my exposed param and it's volume of master. Just double click on this and we can change this, and we want to call this master volume. We now click on music, again come over, expose the parameter. We might as well do this on all of them. Okay, so we now go to our exposed parameters. We'll look for volume of music. We call this music volume. And then we've got our sound effects. So SFX volume. And the final one will be SFX2. Let me keep it consistent. Volume. Right, that's our audio mixer created. We've got our 4 exposed parameters. So we can now go ahead, close that tab. So the first lot of scripts we're going to create are our scriptable objects. So if we go to our scriptable objects folder, okay, so we want to now create our first lot of scriptable objects. So there's going to be 4 in total. So I've got custom scripts that will enable me to create a scriptable object. You just go ahead and create a C# script, and I'll show you the changes you need to make if you haven't made a scriptable object before. So I'm going to create a scriptable object, and we want to call this audio configuration. Okay, we let that compile. Now we want to create the next script. This one will be called Audio Manager Data. Okay, now we want to create another script. Okay, so script to object, and this one will be called Game Audio Group. And one final scriptable object. And we call this one SFX clip. I wanted to use audio clip, but Unity are already using that. So once they've all compiled, we'll open each of these up in Visual Studio. Okay, we're going to want to work on the audio configuration one first, because this one is the biggest one. I'll leave the namespace in. Okay, you would have created a mono behavior, so you should have public class audio configuration, and it should say mono behavior there. Delete the mono behavior and inherit from scriptable object instead. And at the top you want to add this create acid menu. You can tell I've done too much of that in the past. Create asset menu, and then you do file name equals file name. So I'm going to call my file name audio configuration. I'm going to put it in a scriptable objects menu, and then I'm going to do /audio audio, and then audio configuration. Okay, so the variables, we've got a ton of these, and we've got a big method to do. So I'm going to copy and paste these in sections and let you copy them out, and I'll briefly go over what they do. But what this audio configuration file does is basically overwrite everything in the audio source, so we can control the audio source that's playing the sound per individual clip by creating the clip's own audio configuration, or we can just have a default one. So we'll be running default ones for the time being. So the first lot of variables you're going to need are, we'll do a header mixer group, and we want audio mixer group, so we need to use the Unity engine.audio namespace, and that's going to be public audio mixer group output audio mixer group, and we'll set that to null. Then we've got our sound properties. We've got a public bool for mute, a public bool for play on awake, and a public bool for loop. Then we've got 4 float values, one for volume, one for pitch, one for pan stereo, and one for reverb mix. And they've got some range values. Let me zoom in a little bit on that so you can see those. So if you want to pause the video, copy those out, I'll grab the next lot of variables we need. Okay, the next lot of spatialization. I won't roll off. I'll just let you pause the video, copy that out exactly as I've got it there. Right. Okay. Now the next lot, I did say this was big, are our ignores. So we've got bypass effects, bypass listener effects, etc., etc. So if you want to copy those. Okay. So now, also in this, with scriptable objects, we can call methods. So we're going to have a public void apply settings, and that's going to take in an audio source. Right, this is going to be the chore because we've got to replicate everything from the audio source and link it up with all of these properties. So let's go with the first couple. Okay, so we've got audio source output mixer group equals output mixer group, audio source mute equals mute, audio source play and awake equals play and awake. I take it you're catching the drift by now. Okay, the next three you want will be for loop, volume and pitch. I'll keep my mouse out of the way so you can quickly pause, copy those out. Okie doke. Here are the next three: pan, stereo, spatial blend and reverb zone mix. Okay. Three more: Doppler level, spread and roll off mode. Okay. Then we're going to have an if statement and we're going to see if the roll off mode is equal to custom, and if it is, we're going to set the custom curve, and then we're going to set the min distance and max distance. Okay, the last five. So we've got bypass effects, bypass listener effects, bypass reverb zones, ignore listener volume and ignore listener pause. So quickly from the top again, if you want to have a pause, and that's the bottom. Right, that's the worst of the scripts. Now we head on to the Audio Manager data. Again, you'll need to create your asset menu and inherit from Scriptable Objects. I'm going to put a space in there, / audio. Okay, so the variables we're going to need for this. This is nice and simple compared to the last one. We've just got a public float for the master volume, music volume and sound effects volume. Now we want to add some Unity events. Best way to describe these is someone calling out asking for, say, is there someone called Barry? And if there's someone in the room called Barry, they go, yep, that's me. So you have an event and a listener, and if you invoke the event and there's no listener, then it won't cause any errors, which can be a bit of a pain for debugging. But as you can see, events are nice and flexible, and they're a lot cleaner way to code. So let's look at the events we need to implement. Okay, let me just do using Unity engine events. So we've got a public event Unity action that's going to take a string and a float, and that event is called set volume. We've also got another public Unity action, save data. Then we've got a public method raise set volume event that's going to take in a string, the exposed parameter. If you remember, in the mixer we exposed parameters for sound effects, etc, etc, and then a float for the volume. And then we've got set volume question mark dot invoke, and then we're going to pass exposed parameter and volume to it. And then we've got public void raise save data event that's going to do save data question mark dot invoke. Now this question mark is a shorthand of doing a null check. So when this public raise save let me spell it out, raised save, then I still can't do it. Third take, raise save data event is called. If there are no listeners, it won't invoke it. But if there is a listener, then it will invoke it. So that's everything we need for the Audio Manager data. The next is a game audio group. So let me again just make my adjustments here. The game audio group, we're going to have one of these per audio mixer channel. So we'll have a music one, a master volume one, possibly, and a sound effects one. It's entirely up to you. I'll include master, music, etc. But you can include whatever you want to include. AUD. Not only can I not talk today, I can't type today, which is again a typical Cedarwood software video. Okay, so variables for this. Okay, let me just get rid of that error. So these are all the actions we're going to have. So we're going to have a primary audio event, a secondary audio event. It's going to take an audio source, a sound effects clip, and an audio configuration file. We're then going to have a fade in audio event and a fade out audio event. We're going to have a stop audio event that's just going to take an audio source, and then we want a public audio source. We set that to null and hide that in the inspector. Now we just need to create the raise event methods for each of these events. So if we jump down here, right, that's zoomed out far enough. So the first one will be public void raise primary audio event, and that would be audio source, SFX clip, audio clip. You can call that SFX clip if you wish. And then audio configuration. And like we did in the manager data, we're going to do primary audio event invoke. Then we're going to pass the audio source, audio clip and audio configuration in. Exactly the same for the secondary, but we're going to invoke the secondary audio event. Again, exactly the same for the fade in and fade out, apart from we're going to pass in the fade in and fade out audio events. And finally the stop audio event, we're just passing the stop audio event and the audio source. So that's the third scriptable object finished. I'll just scroll up to the top, so if you want to pause and type out those actions. Okay, and there's our event methods. The last one is our sound effects script. So we'll start with our variables. Okay, so we want a header. Then we're going to have a public game audio group, which we call audio group. A public audio configuration, which we call audio configuration. A public audio clip called audio clip. Then we have a little space. Then we want to float for track offset. So if one of your tracks has got a bit of a longer outro, you can give this a negative figure. And then a fade duration. And then we've got these music rumble options. These will be used in the next video series on audio when we're going to make gamepad rumble to a heartbeat and some music. I'd still recommend putting those in. Let me just change this. So while I'm doing this, pause the video, copy this scriptable object out. Okay, we can now, with all of those complete, save those, close those all down, jump back into Unity, wait for them all to compile. Now if we jump into Scriptable Objects, we'll create a folder called Default Audio Groups. And in here now we can create audio, and we create a game audio group, and we call this music. Again, Scriptable Objects, audio, game audio group, master, where are my Scriptable Objects, audio, game audio group, SF, X, and one final one, SFX2. Okay, then we'll create another folder, and we call this Default Settings, and then we'll create an audio configuration for music, so we do music master, and we pick music as the output mixer group, and we'll leave the rest blank because we don't want to touch it. Then we want another one, SFX master, and that go through the SFX channel. And then one more SFX2 master, and that will go through the SFX2 channel. Okay, so that's all of our default scriptable objects set up. We've got our Scriptable Objects script set up. So we now need to create a new mono behavior. And we call this one Audio Manager. And yeah, I'm not worried about those errors. You won't get those. And I've spelt it wrong. So let me save that. And let me just comment those out. So let's get rid of Audio Manager. And call it Audio Manager. Because I created it with editor. I need to change the editor script. Right. Now we're ready for some variables. Alright, we've got a lot to get through, and we're probably 25 minutes in. So let me just get rid of that error there. We need to be using Unity engine to audio. And we're going to blast through these as quickly as possible. So they're all the variables we're going to need. We want our audio settings, we want a link to our mixer, a link to our Audio Manager data scriptable object, and then we've got private strings for our master, music and sound effects volume channels. These are the exposed parameters we set in the mixer. Then for our music channel, we've got a game audio group we call music source, and then a private audio source for the music source. For the sound effects channels, we'll have a game audio group for the primary sound effects source, an audio source for it. Again, a game audio group for the secondary sound effects source, an audio source for that. Then we've got our debug settings, so we've got a ball to enable debug. Then we've got three floats for our master, music and sound effects volume with the range of 1 to 0. Okay, if you want to pause that. Okay, our Unity base methods. We get rid of all of those. And let's paste these new ones in. don't worry about these errors. So in the start method, we want to set audio data. On enable, we're going to subscribe to the manager data.setVolume event with a setVolume method. Again, the manager data save data event with a save data method. For the music source, we're going to subscribe to the primary and the stop audio events with the play music and stop music methods. For our fade in and fade out events, again we're going to do music source and we're going to have a fade in and fade out method. Our primary sound effects source, we're only going to subscribe to the primary sound effects, and that's going to play the sound effects. The difference between sound effects and play music is sound effects plays one shot at how a sound effect should be played, and play music will allow you to play a sound effect and just loop it until you decide you don't want to do it anymore. So our secondary sound effect source, we're going to subscribe to the primary sound effect source, the secondary and the stop audio events. For the primary, we're going to play music, play sound effects. For the secondary, we're going to subscribe to the play music method, and for the stop event, we're going to subscribe to the stop method. Then we're going to set our main audio sources. On disable is exactly the same as above, apart from the first thing we're going to do is save the audio data to the scriptable object. Now you're going to need to get and set the data when you enable and quit the game, because although the scriptable objects will carry the data through the game without having to alter it, and whatever you save in the editor in a build, it will reset to its default values, so you need to save and load that to a data manager. But our on disabled event is exactly the same, but we're doing minus equals, so you can copy all of that, paste that in there and just change the plus equals to minus equals. And then on validate, so this is only going to work in the editor. We're going to check if debug's enabled, and if the application is playing, we're going to set our volume, and we're going to set our master volume, music volume and sound effects volume. And then if update sliders is ticked, it's just going to set the slider volumes to whatever is in the scriptable object. And then if our save data ball is ticked, we're just going to save our audio data. Okay, user methods. Before I go on them, I'll quickly go up to the top. So you can do pause, copy those down. Okay, there's on disable. And there's the on validate. Alright, user methods next. Okay, again there's a ton of these, so we'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. So the first one will be public void play sound of SFX. And if you remember from the scriptable objects, these audio events took in an audio source, a sound effects clip and an audio configuration. So we're going to go public void play SFX, and then we want these in there, and then we're going to do audio configuration dot apply settings and then audio source, and then audio source dot play one shot SFX clip dot audio clip. Okay, play music. Again, we'll take in those three parameters. Again, we're going to do audio configuration that applies settings to the audio source. We're then going to set the audio source clip to the sound effects audio clip, and then we're going to call the play method on the audio source. On the fade in music, again that takes an audio source, a clip and a configuration file, and then we're going to apply the configuration settings to the audio source. Then we're going to start a coroutine called fade in audio, and that's going to take in an audio source, a string for the exposed parameter, which will be the music volume, the sound effects clip that we're going to fade out, and the fade duration. Fade out music again takes the three parameters, but this time all we're going to do is do the audio source, the exposed parameter and the fade duration. Stop music takes an audio source, and we're just going to do audio source.stop. Set volume takes a string, exposed parameter and a float volume. And then we're going to clamp the volume between a really low number, because if the volume goes below 0 it freak out. So we're going to clamp that to a really low number and 1. And then we're going to do audio mixer set float, the exposed parameter, which could be master volume, sound effects volume. And then we're going to do mathf.log10, the volume, which is the float passing here, times 20. And then we've got our get volume method, which is going to take in a string for the exposed parameter, and then we're just going to do audio mixer get float exposed parameter out float.volume, and then we're going to return mathf.pow this time 10, volume divided by 20. What these do is convert 0 to 1 into a value between 0 and -80. I'll set main audio sources. So we're going to set the primary music, the music source, audio source, to our music source, audio source. Then we're going to set our primary sound effects source, audio source, to the primary sound effects source. Again for the secondary. In set audio data, we're going to set volume, and if you remember, volume takes in a string and a value. So we're going to set the master volume to the manager data.master volume value. So in here, you want to get these values first from your data manager, and then set the volumes. And finally, in the save audio data, we're going to get the manager data settings, and we're going to get the current volume settings, save them to the scriptable object, and then you want to save those out to a data manager. So all we need now is the two coroutines. So if I go up the top here and we just scroll down first, there's the first couple of methods if you want to pause. Okay. There's the next lot of methods. Okay. And that's the final method down there. So the coroutines. Okie doke, so the first is our fade in audio coroutine. That's going to take an audio source, a string for the exposed parameter, our music clip, and the duration of the fade. So first thing we're going to do is declare a float current time and set that to 0. We're then going to declare another float called current volume, and we're going to get the exposed parameter, which will be, in our case, music volume. We're then going to set the volume to 0. We're going to set the audio source clip to our music clip. We're going to play the clip, then we're going to do a while loop, and while our current time is less than duration, we're going to increase our current time by time.delta time. Then we're going to create a new float called new volume, and we're going to loop that between 0 and the current volume, between current time divided by duration. And then we're going to use the set volume method, and we're going to set the exposed parameter to the new volume, and then we're going to yield return null. And when that's finished, we're just going to break out the coroutine. The fade out coroutine, again, the first thing we do is we're going to get the current volume. We're going to then set the current time to 0. And while current time is less than the duration, we're going to increase the current time. Again, this time we're going to create our float, but we're going to alert from our current volume to 0. And then we're going to set the volume, yield return null. Once that's finished, we're going to stop the audio source. We're going to reset our volume back to the current volume that we've got up here, and then we're going to break. So that's the two coroutines. So that's the first one, and that's the second one. I haven't included crossfading between an extra music channel, but you can add an extra music channel in, and you can fade in on one channel and fade out on the other. But you'll have to create your own events for that, because it could get quite messy trying to keep track of what audio channel you're playing your data on. So we can now save that, jump back into Unity, go to our Audio Manager, and that's the AudioEventTest Script. We'll get to that in a minute. And I didn't want to do that either. Okay, let me just recover this. Right, click on our Audio Manager. We'll get rid of that. And we'll drag our Audio Manager script on. So for the audio mixer, we're going to choose our audio mixer. For our manager data, there is none, so we haven't created that. So in our default settings, we've got audio groups. We can get rid of the master channel, we're not going to need that. Default settings, so in there we're going to create audio manager data. Okay, so now we can set our audio manager data. Our music source will be music. Our primary sound effects will be SFX. And our secondary will be, so we now need to add these audio sources. So under the audio manager, create an empty object, add a component, audio source, untick play on awake, and then duplicate that 2 more times. So this first one's going to be our master volume, and then in the output we're going to choose master. This one's going to be music volume, and then we're going to choose music. This can be SFX1. That will go to the SFX channel. And then we finally want one more for our secondary sound effects channel. Okay, so that's our audio sources all set up. Play on awaits not ticked on any of them. So we can now drag our music source, our sound effects sources in. Now we're ready to create some audio clips. So we can now jump down into the prefabs folder and we can create a prefab of the audio manager. Right, you saw me mucking about with an AudioEventTest Script. We'll open that up and have a look at that. There's going to be a link down in the description below where you can grab this script. So go ahead, download it, import it to your project and attach it to an empty game object. And then if you highlight all of these in Visual Studio and do Ctrl-KU, that will uncomment all of those. We want to leave the heartbeat stuff commented. So all this is basic examples on how to call the event, but because we're doing it in update and we're using balls, we need this event enabled ball to stop repeated calls. And then we go down and we go into the play audio section first and uncomment where it says erase the sound effects primary audio event. So this is how we actually play the sounds. We've got our sound effects clip. The sound effects clip has got the audio group, which is the sound effects audio group. And if you remember, in the audio group we created some events: raise primary, secondary, stop and fade in and out. So we're going to pass in the sound effects audio group sound effects source. Now it doesn't have to be that audio source, it can be any audio source you want it to play through. Then we're going to pass in, because if you remember, if we have a look at that, it wants an audio source, a sound effects clip and an audio configuration file. Because this is a sound effect, we're only calling the play SFX one shot method. So what we're going to do is we're going to reset the ball and just debug log play sound effects. Heartbeat, don't touch for the minute, that's for a later episode. So in our play music, uncomment the raise the music clip primary audio event. And again, that's the same as the sound effects. And if you remember, in the audio manager, our primary audio event calls the play music method. Stop music. Uncomment music clip 1 and music clip 2, but leave the heartbeat and audio rumble commented out. Now in the fade music, we can uncomment these. we can uncomment the start coroutine, and we can uncomment that. As you can see, there's comments on the code, so I won't go on about explaining it. But if we now save that, jump back, now we're ready for a sound effects clip and some music clips. So we now need to create those clips. So I've got an audio folder with sound effects and some music. So let me create a new folder called SFX Clips. We'll jump into there, create a new scriptable object, sound effects clip. The game audio group is going to go through sound effects. The audio configuration will be the sound effects master. And the audio clip will be the jump audio clip. We don't need to worry about any of those. So I can now drag that sound effect into there. Let me create a new folder called Music Clips. Again, we jump in, we create a new sound effects clip. It goes to the music channel, the master music audio configuration, and we'll leave that blank for the minute. We'll call this Music 1, and I'll just duplicate that. About 8 times, because we've got we've got episodes in the future where we're going to run a jukebox. So let's add some audio tracks now to these scriptable objects. Okay, let's select that for that one. This for this one, sticking with the theme of my childhood, hence the weird intro. Okay, if we now go to our audio event test, we can click the play music ball and it should start playing the music. Okay, I need to assign the clips, as usual, typical Cedarwood software, and hit play. Okay, so here we go, it's playing music and stopping music. Again, if we play it again, and then we can fade between the clips. This won't come out brilliant because I've had to really lower the volumes of all the music, because I've had to re-record a lot of this as I paused it all up. So, but if I tick that, you'll hear it fade out and it fades in between the next track. So the final thing to do would be to delete the audio manager out of this scene, and we'll save this scene. I've got an empty scene here. Let me clear that log. I'll go to my prefabs and let me save that. And we can load the sample scene on. So as you can see, the audio manager is now in one scene. We click on our audio event test and hit play first before I tick on the thing. As you can see, it's playing it from the audio manager in a separate scene, so it acts perfectly like a singleton. turn that off. So yeah, it acts perfectly like a singleton would. Works across scenes, but it's not actually a singleton. It's just based off all of these scriptable objects. Right. This video has gone on much longer than I thought it would go on. The next video we'll look at adding some rumble to our joypad and hook it all up to this system, but we'll probably use C# events instead of Unity events, just to change things up slightly. Alright, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.